This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
With sporting activity grounded in many parts of the world, Africa has not been left behind in the global rise of eSports as avid fans turn to video consoles to keep them occupied during the COVID-19 lockdown. In tonight's sports scene, we tour the four corners of the continent to bring you the rapidly changing landscape of eSports. Hello and welcome to your weekly sports program that brings you all the news from an African perspective. We will highlight the thrill of victory while also showing you the agony of defeat. I'm Richard Nta in Nairobi. This is Sports Scene. Let's get real, let's get live, let's get at it. Here's what's coming up in the show. Our business anchor, Raman Yang, breaks down the facts and figures of global esports. And marathon record holder Eliud Kipchoge's foundation distributes relief food to Kenyan athletes hardest hit by COVID-19. Once again, welcome and thanks for tuning in into Sports Scene. Well, the coronavirus pandemic has halted all sporting activities. However, for esports, it seems to be business as usual, maybe even better. Many people are now turning to esports as a way of bridging the gap that traditional sport has left. Virtual football tournaments, tennis events, and motor racing have seen sporting celebrities pick up controllers and face their fans in a new chapter for esports. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
That was a good goal there, but unfortunately overall...
Esports is riding the wave of success and global attention, while the rest of the traditional sports world stands by and waits patiently to resume. The worldwide gaming phenomenon that has captured the imagination of millions continues to enjoy immense growth, despite several events being postponed and sports fans being confined to their homes.
It is the closest thing, and it feeds all the needs we have if you're a sporting fan. So obviously, I love traditional sports. I also love esports. I love competition. I love watching the best of the best go against each other. I love the David Goliath stories that come into play, and you can get all of that in esports. I don't think it will ever feed the same thrill as watching your favorite football team run onto a field or watching a goal live, but there's a different thrill that it feeds, and I think for a lot of people, they need that because they're missing it, so it's an easy crossover.
Esports is benefiting from a largely captive audience and is seeing a crossover between the sportsmen and women themselves and gaming, resulting in a huge upswing for the industry.
Definitely. I mean, you see now all you've seen the amount of celebrities, the amount of these, soccer players, everyone. I mean, and it's not necessarily about only the soccer guys playing FIFA or the Formula One guys racing to kind of create that virtual world. It's also those same guys. Like I saw Sergio Aguero racing in a Formula One racing. So, this is part of everybody's everyday lives, but only now it's kind of being brought up because, quite frankly, there's just nothing else to do. But 100%, and again, it's not great to kind of benefit from it, but at the end of the day, we'll take what we can get.
Although South Africa's esports scene is very much in its infancy, the signs are there that the Rainbow Nation possesses the talent to take on the global giants of gaming.
I definitely think we do have the talent to challenge the best, and we've seen it just recently. We had a selection of CSGO, Counter-Strike, Global Offensive players. They actually relocated to America, and I think just this week, if I'm not mistaken, they beat one of the best teams in the world 2 days ago before we chatted, and are now ranked in the top 20 in the world in terms of teams and players. So that speaks for itself, the fact that they could go over with a lot of obstacles, a lot more obstacles than many of the other players they're against, and in a very short space of time get to that level.
The borderless nature of gaming is allowing esports to continue uninterrupted during the global crisis, and as a result could possibly go a long way to help sports brands stifled by the pandemic target a whole new generation of fans who weren't initially interested in traditional sports. The resulting crossover could well be beneficial for esports, but in fact traditional sports too. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
We cross over to North Africa, where clubs in Tunisia are taking part in local and international online tournaments as the popularity of eSports in the country increases. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shawashi with more.
Espérance Sportive de Tunis is one of the first teams in the North African country to approve the creation of an eSport team. Around 40 ESC players from many regions across the country have their professional licenses. They continue to play even during the lockdown.
The idea of creating an esports team generated as part of the digitization project of Espérance and the celebration of our club's 100th anniversary. The world's top clubs are active online in this period.
Tarek Swisi is one of the senior members of the executive bureau of the Blood and Gold team. The club administration has backed and financed all esport initiatives of the younger generation before and during the pandemic.
Our esports team has reached the first online African Champions League final. We've also played many friendly matches with African clubs like Orlando Pirates and Raja Casablanca and European teams like Verona in Italy this week.
Many tournaments are played on FIFA 20. The competitions have recently captured a wide audience with tens of thousands of online followers and supporters.
I've been playing FIFA since my childhood. It's a passion which has become a full-time job with my favorite club.
We are proud because esports players are treated like any professional athlete at Espérance. We are followed and encouraged by the club and fans who are very active online.
Espérance has found an original way to give its supporters their weekly football fix through FIFA 20. The eSport team members say the game is very realistic, with stunning player models and animations.
Since the beginning of the pandemic in Tunisia, football clubs here are getting more involved in the world of esports. Professional players say online tournaments can improve their club brand and fan base, while enabling centenary clubs to connect with the new generations. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Esports was relatively unknown in Nigeria, the most populous West African nation before the coronavirus pandemic. The Minister of Sports, Sunday Dare, has recently announced that his ministry will soon launch esports in the country following a surge in popularity. CGTN's Deji Badman speaks to Emmanuel Oyelakin, the president of Esports Nigeria, and begins by asking him about the state of gaming in Nigeria.
There are thousands, if not millions, of people that have been playing video games in Nigeria, for decades now. But the concept of esports, as we have it today, did not really become something that we were working on until like a decade ago. But the challenge is there hasn't been much attention on esports like we have today, for obvious reasons. Yes. So COVID-19 somehow is a blessing in disguise. I hate to say it, we're here and we're making the best of it. So now that we don't have traditional sports anymore, the next available option is to play esports.
Let's quickly talk about the games themselves. I mean, which games are more popular here in Nigeria?
FIFA, for obvious reasons. We love FIFA so much, you know. And some people won't even play any other game besides FIFA, you know, because that's a popular game that
I love football.
Yes, we love football. But also we have a couple of other games that Nigerians also play. A lot of Nigerians have mobile phones, you know. So you have PUBG, you have Call of Duty, you have games like Brawl Stars, you have League of Legends. You know, that's a PC game, you know, but of course you can play on your laptop, you know. There's Dota 2, but I'm not sure we have a large community for that in Nigeria yet. There is Fortnite, you know, that Nigerians also love to play. There is Gran Turismo, there is GTA, Grand Theft Auto.
Post-COVID-19, you think the interest for esports will still be there?
Well, because our world is no longer the same. Our world has changed. Gaming online has been happening, but it was never brought to prominence until the pandemic. And now that it's in the open, it won't go again, because it was there before, it will be there, it's there now, it will be there afterwards. In fact, it's now even going to grow bigger, because the attention it didn't have before, previously, it now has. So post-COVID-19, trust me, esports is even going to boom even bigger.
Like many countries affected by the global COVID-19 crisis, sporting activity has ground to a halt in Kenya. Enthusiasts in the East African country have now turned to esports to fill the gap, as CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar now reports.
COVID-19 has shaken up the sporting world, but globally, esports is on the rise since it can continue uninterrupted. In Kenya, Farid Kipirash, a founder of La Galat, a content creation hub that feeds the gaming community with interesting material, agrees that this is an exciting time for esports.
The stay-home directive has definitely helped esports, indirectly of course, but when you're confined in a space and the only thing that you can do in that space is interact with what you can reach, you'll see that certain things sort of skyrocketed and peaked. The gaming industry is no different, so esports has sort of benefited from this period indirectly.
However, despite being in a strong position for growth, esports still faces numerous challenges.
Funding and that sort of access to these tournaments, these esports tournaments and even online tournaments is definitely a challenge in terms of like furthering the sport. The second challenge I see is the audience. For anything to thrive, you need to have an audience that demands the content, that wants the content. So for me, I basically see this as a challenge, because if the audience doesn't know this exists and is a consumable avenue for content, you will have very low numbers, and this proves a challenge in terms of ratings. And if your ratings are low, there will be fewer people willing to invest in your sport.
The setbacks have served as motivation, and according to Farid, the future is only going to get brighter for esports.
I'd say the future of esports is quite inviting, because there are bigger budgets across the board. There's more players getting involved, and the audience is ever growing. So with a genre that's so niche, used to be so niche at least, esports and video gaming in general is growing, and it's looking to go into this space whereby it becomes the top form of entertainment.
With the right investments, esports in Kenya and Africa at large has something to look forward to in the near future. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
The action continues on Sports Scene. Here's a look at what's ahead. Our business anchor, Raman Young, breaks down the facts and figures on the impact of esports on global economy.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. For some of us, the idea of watching others playing video games would seem to make no sense at all. In some circles, the idea of being a professional player of video games is just ridiculous. But as CGTN's Raman Young now explains, not only are both of those fast-growing and lucrative occupations, they're also at the heart of a multi-billion-dollar business.
Thank you, Richard. I do remember having this conversation 2 decades ago as a teenager. The idea of being a professional gamer, much less one from Africa, was simply not a viable option. Say that to an African parent and see yourself getting laughed out of the room. Esports, much less the video game business, wasn't something that was taken seriously. But that is no longer the case if you know where to look. So just last year, for example, PricewaterhouseCoopers estimated that the video game industry around the world will be worth $162 billion in 2023. That's roughly half of South Africa's GDP. Esports is still a small part of that, but it's growing very rapidly. Back in 2014, spending on esports was relatively small, just $194 million. But last year, that number rose to $980 million. Before this pandemic, it was forecast to grow by around 18% a year to close to $2 billion by 2023. Now, here's another way of looking at how big the size of the esports market is and how fast it's growing. Back in 2014, Amazon bought out a company that you probably may not have heard of, unless you're a gamer, called Twitch. He paid about $970 million for that company. Today, that streaming service isn't just worth nearly $4 billion. It's also the biggest streaming site for video game content worldwide. It's even bigger than Google-owned YouTube. And much like Netflix, it's benefited from the movement restrictions around the world. The average number of viewers jumped from 1.35 million in January to just under 2.5 million in April. Now, for comparison, that's more than the 1.7 million people who tuned in to watch the Liverpool-Arsenal match in the 2018-2019 season in the UK. And Twitch does this virtually every day. So if you have audiences that big and that dedicated, it can often translate into some pretty big prize pools. So take, for example, Tiger Woods, right? Last year, he won the US Masters in Augusta in April. He walked away with about $2 million for that particular tournament win. Barely 3 months later, this young 16-year-old, Kyle Justoff, he won a Fortnite tournament and walked home with $3 million. The number two in that tournament got about $1.8 million. So if your child comes up to you and says they want to be a pro gamer, this sort of thing might explain why. But to be fair, it's not just about earth-shattering amounts of money. This is a very computing-intensive sport. And when not gaming, that computing power can be donated, quite literally, elsewhere. So the combined donated processing power to the Folding at Home project, worth Googling that, by the way, which runs research into a range of diseases, cancer, Parkinson's disease, and now COVID-19. If you put all of that computing power together, it's more than the world's top 500 supercomputers combined. We're talking about exaflops here. This is simply a billion times a billion calculations every second. It's pretty impressive what gamers can do when they put their minds together. That's a very brief primer into the world of esports. Richard, back to you.
Well, thank you, Rama, for that insightful look into the world of esports and the figures involved. The rising global popularity is quite staggering. Now, on to other stories making headlines. In Uganda, the government has announced its plans to upgrade the country's major sporting facility. The Mandela National Stadium was recently banned from hosting international matches until it met the required standards. CGTN's Leon Sienga reports from Kampala.
It is the biggest sports facility in Uganda, officially opened 23 years ago. The Mandela National Stadium has been a fortress for Uganda's football success. It is, however, facing the grim reality of not hosting any continental matches again. Africa's football governing body CAF banned the use of the stadium following an inspection conducted in March.
The two inspections, one that was done by the Minister of Education and the one of CAF, they all agree that the stadium has got to be renovated and upgraded. Now the key areas are four, which is the dressing room, the pitch, the floodlights and the media facilities, and the venue operations center.
CAF's decision will affect the local football federation the most. Uganda was scheduled to host a series of Africa and FIFA World Cup qualifier matches at the stadium.
There's been an upgrade in the standards that are required. Probably in the past, certain things have been acceptable, but the improvement in the requirements by CAF, definitely we are making us fall outside the minimum requirements.
There is an immediate need to fix key areas in this facility so it can host international matches again. But the government says it cannot guarantee a timeline for the redevelopment of the stadium. According to the country's State Minister for Sports, the first process on the stadium upgrade has started. There is still a lot more to do.
Phase number 2 is needs assessment. And this assessment should come up with bills of quantities. Whether we will be able to know that in order to renovate this particular national sports facility, this is the cost implication.
A second inspection of the facility was scheduled for June this year. That has been put on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Until the facility is deemed football worthy, other options to host Uganda's international matches could be considered.
Within, we have the option of using St. Mary's, Chitende, which was equally inspected. Without, we can only be able to play all our senior CAF and FIFA games out of the country.
In 2018, the government announced its plans to construct 4 state-of-the-art stadia across the country. Those would ease the usage of the Mandela National Stadium. Those plans are yet to take off. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Wakiso, Central Uganda.
And we're not done just yet. Here's a look at what's ahead. Marathon record holder Eliud Kipchoge's foundation distributes relief food to Kenyan athletes hardest hit by COVID-19.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You got to get out, go there, and you find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
And welcome back. For the past 2 weeks, world marathon record holder Eliud Kipchoge has been distributing relief food to vulnerable athletes affected by the coronavirus pandemic through his Eliud Kipchoge Foundation. The initiative is aimed at aiding runners who have lost income due to races canceled over the COVID-19 crisis. The Rio 2016 Olympic gold winner is distributing food donated by the ministry and well-wishers and has so far reached over 100 runners. Aspiring female distance runner Vivian Kiplagat is one of the beneficiaries.
The situation is not good. You know, they are mostly affected. They are not having their jobs. They are not having monthly salaries. But all you know is that they rely fully on the races abroad, and everywhere is locked. So they're really on hard times, and that's why we give a thought and say, let us just call upon the corporates, the individuals, then we partner together and we can help where we can.
It's not easy. Life is so difficult. In my case, I have to pay rent and there is nothing I'm depending on. I was relying on small races. Because of this pandemic, we have no choice but to do individual training in small groups because big groups are not allowed.
Well, Olympic athletes from around the world have put their dreams on hold for the time being after the Tokyo 2020 Games were postponed to next year. CGTN's Julie Shire caught up with Caitlin Rooskrantz, the first South African gymnast to qualify for the Games in over a decade, and prepared this report.
South African gymnast Caitlin Rooskrantz made history last year when her bar routine won gold at the World Challenge Cup. She had her heart set on an Olympic debut this year, but sadly, it was not meant to be.
2020 Tokyo Olympics was where I wanted to be, you know, and then you qualify for it and you work, you kind of plan your whole life around it, shift everything, you know. I moved my studies a year later and all to, you know, try and benefit me doing well at this Olympics, and then it gets postponed, you know, so it was a big shock to me.
Caitlin has kept her spirits up by training at home, but she's worried the Johannesburg Gymnastics Club won't survive the lockdown.
It is a small business, you know, and relies a lot on the income of all, the gymnasts that go there. So with, the results of this pandemic and a lot of parents losing their jobs, therefore not being able to send their kids to JGC anymore, now we've taken a big hit. I still need a facility to be able to train in, to be able to get to the Olympics. Not only that, but a lot of my teammates are actually still trying to go for one more spot.
Her club started a 100-day handstand challenge on social media. All it takes is some bravery and a few clicks to donate on the club's Back a Buddy page.
It doesn't have to be an amazing handstand. We've had a few parents doing it. You can do it up against a wall. So any place where, you're able to kind of do a handstand, you take a picture of yourself or a video, you upload it on social media, and then you kind of tag other people to do it. Hashtag keep us standing, and then tag a company or someone which you would like to sponsor your handstand. And then that person can go to the link and then they can donate as much as they would like.
The initiative has so far raised $3,000 of its $5,000 target. It will help cover coaches' salaries and keep the gym afloat for 3 months. But it will also keep the Olympic dream alive for the African champion and many other youngsters. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A remarkable story there. Well, as Tanzania inches towards resuming sporting activity, the COVID-19 lockdown caused uncertainty and anxiety among athletes in the country. CGTN Daniel Kijo tracked a basketball team in Dar es Salaam to find out how they have been faring during this period.
Linda Mushi says she's not afraid of competition because she trusts her skills and the many hours of hard training that she's put in. The daughter of an ex-national basketball champion, she has big shoes to fill and big dreams. But the sudden halt in sports has thrown her off her stride.
It's difficult to get out and come play basketball if you're unsure of what's to come, when your next game is, what you're really training for, if you're even gonna play this year even. So it's difficult.
She is part of a youth training program called Unmatched Basketball. The program aims to improve basketball and life skills as well as provide mentorship to youth. Its founder says the COVID-19 pandemic has affected his training programs, impacting not just his players' bodies, but their minds as well.
When you're an athlete, you build up bonds, you build up chemistry to people, and sometimes if you're not well mentally, it kind of crushes you down when that is taken away from you, and to some point in time, things might get tough and make you do decisions that they're not mindful.
Coach Phineas says coaches must now provide a sense of direction and focus, which can have a positive impact on important psychological states such as confidence and motivation.
While major sports leagues in Tanzania may have suspended play, sportsmen and women still need support. Coach Phineas Kahabi harnesses the power of technology to keep delivering it.
The coach now uses online platforms to regularly talk and encourage his athletes to keep on training. He encourages them to promote healthy tactics to keep training during this pandemic.
This is a time whereby now we as coaches, we really have to enforce a relationship between players and us far way more than basketball, in terms of knowing how they're doing, checking them up, how are they coping up with this stress.
Coach Phineas says the benefits of the online program are as much mental as they are physical. As right now, winning may not be about a trophy, but rather using technology to allow for new ways to train and boost moods. He says just like in a basketball match, they all must adjust and find plays that will keep them in the game. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, that's it for this edition of Sports Scene. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Nta saying thank you so much for watching, and we'll be right back here, same time next week. Till then, take care.